First off, I'd like to thank Ross Video both for the lunch and for sponsoring this panel that's coming up. So if we give them a quick round of applause. All right, let's get things started. My name is Hogan Ketchum. I'm the senior editor for Sports Video Group, and I'm very excited to moderate this next panel because it has been brought up on every single panel prior to this one, which is the centralized control room. So we're going to get to a lot, and then, of course, I'm going to open it up to questions and make sure that we get everything answered for you guys. I'd like to start on my far right. If you could just introduce yourselves, just a quick overview of both your position as well as your university and a little bit about your facilities, and we can jump from there. So, Ron, if you'd like to start.
Ron Blatz, I'm from Valparaiso University. I've been working at the university for 5 years now, and I took over the broadcast and streaming manager position. The position was actually created for me. After we left the Horizon League, went into the Missouri Valley Conference, we built a brand new control room, a centralized control room where everything is fiber connected to all of our other venues. And they made the position for me because we did not have that position before. Our previous broadcasts for the Horizon League were very minimal and not very great quality, but thanks to Alpha Video, we built a brand new state-of-the-art centralized control room.
My name's Clint Burges. I'm the Director of Video Operations at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. With the advent of creating football back, we had a 21-year stint of no football. We actually had a lot of infrastructure issues, and so they kind of created a video coordinator position in which they let me raise my hand for it. And so from that standpoint, we kind of migrated into display technology and fiber between different facilities and so on. So it's been a joyous ride, so to speak.
Hi, I'm Michelle Glover. I'm the Assistant AD for Broadcast Services at the University of Arkansas, going into my 7th year there. When I got there, there were no control rooms. With the SEC network, we launched with them 3 control rooms that are all fiber connected to all of our venues across campus.
I'm Andy Richardson, Assistant AD for 12th Man Productions at Texas A&M. We, like a lot of people in this room, did video board shows for many, many years. In 2014, we partnered along with 13 other schools for the SEC network. That created the need to have a centralized control room in our world to do multiple events and support those. So as part of the genesis of all this, we built out what is 3 full control rooms and 1 that I would call a video board control room, and the facility supports multiple events throughout the year.
Hi, my name is Schatz. I'm the Vice President of Sales with Ross, and we're grateful to be amongst these great collegiate broadcasters. And over the years, I've spent a lot of time developing our collegiate broadcast and venue initiatives, and I think it's quite amazing what has been accomplished from the folks in this room, so we're happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Ron, let's start with you. You've just built out this centralized control room. I believe it launched in October.
It did launch in October.
Talk a little bit about some of your biggest lessons learned. And while you're running through those, I believe you brought some photos that we can show to see what you're dealing with.
The biggest lesson learned, at least for myself and the university, is the amount of time that we actually had to do this project. We started planning it as soon as we announced that we were moving to the Valley. We spent less than 6 months planning this room, and with the help of Alpha Video, we built it in 3 weeks. And it went online immediately. In between October and the end of the school year, we did 57 broadcasts out of this room. And we already have 59 planned for the fall alone.
Yeah. And so what were some of the biggest reasons behind pursuing a centralized control room as opposed to either multiple rooms or a fly pack model?
We were with a fly pack model with a TriCaster and 3-play before, and it became such wear and tear on the equipment that it was constantly failing. and the cost alone just to have stuff repaired justified us going to a centralized control room.
And Clint, you've had your room for, I believe, well over 10, 15 years. How do you keep those facilities up to date with all of the various requirements that are being thrown on you and thrown on that facility?
A lot of reading and a lot of watching. From our standpoint, we actually just had this conversation the last 2 days. From our standpoint, you've got to kind of keep up with the trends. When we decided to have a video board room and then have an E3 room and kind of separate those out, I've always been a big proponent of killing as many birds with one stone as you can. And so, if you buy a router that can serve 8 purposes versus one that maybe is just for one set use, you've got to know that. And that's why I always tell people that get into centralized control rooms or, building out rooms for whatever reason, take the time to learn that technology a little bit. Take the time to understand what it takes to develop it and move it to the next level and understand the ins and outs of, hey, this can help the video board side of things, the display technology side versus maybe, an ESPN show per se. So you really have to be readiness to understand and read and learn and want to actually learn some of those things. And that's kind of where we've kind of helped to progress. And we've also, another side note of that is we've also kind of instilled a culture of trying to become technically apt for everybody. And I know that's tough because you get 18, 19-year-old kids, you're not expecting them to break a camera part or anything like that per se, but for us, trying to understand how to pragmatically fix a problem. And with kids, that's tough, but that's also a life lesson they need to understand as well.
Great. And Andy and Michelle, so often these control rooms, the reason that they're centralized, the reason that we, have to talk about them is they're not only responsible for the video boards, they're also responsible so often for the linear network. And, who better to discuss what that really means than the two of you from the SEC network perspective. Michelle, I'm going to start with you. I believe you brought a short video to show a little bit about what you do at Arkansas.
Yes, so the video is what we use to recruit students. It's to give them a look at our rooms. We have 2 large control rooms and a 3rd smaller room because we are often doing a broadcast and a video board show at the same time. And as all of you know, sports overlap. In the spring, we're using all 3 all at the same time. So we utilize the 2 large control rooms, our replay, we use Dreamcatcher, that's a separate room. Our audio is also in a separate room. That's our shading room, that's by the look. So our biggest challenge is trying to keep everybody happy, video board side, broadcast side, at all times.
Great. And then Andy, you brought a few photos as well, and then we'll dive into a little bit about what the SEC network biggest lessons learned have been for the two of you guys. So.
Right. I think we have the photos. We can show them at any time. But what our control room, I guess 2012 we had a transition year. We were moving into a new conference, SEC West. We were starting a freshman quarterback. We didn't know how he would do. He ended up doing very well, and there was a lot of interest in making our stadium bigger at the time, and so our stadium went from 87,000 to 102,512 now. So as part of that, in 2012 and 2013, we started planning a new facility that would go into the newer part of the stadium. About that same time, we were having discussions with our friends at ESPN and Scott Hecht and Rex Arend and some of the other people associated with ESPN about what would a network look like and how would we need to support it. As a group of people that a lot of us had done video board shows forever, that was going to be a unique challenge. How would you crew it? How would you do multiple events at the same time? What were some of those things how would we facilitate some of those things? So what we ended up doing is planning out a facility that ended up being about $11.8 million. And it came online October of 2014. We did our first event of anything in November 24th of 2014 with a video board show for our women's basketball team. And I think it was February 19th on 2015, we did our first multiple event show where we did a opening day men's baseball game and an opening day women's softball game at the exact same time with all 4 control rooms running, 2 doing video board shows, and the other 2 doing SEC digital broadcast shows. That was, and had 60 students working during that 6 to 8 hour period. And then we realized that not only would we have to do that, we'd have to do it multiple times. Here's one of the, this is our studio. We got a new football coach the other day. He's on the left, Jimbo's something, and Will. We're working with them in terms of using this facility. This facility does a lot of different things as far as the studio aspect of everything. Gives us a lot of flexibility to do things with our students, things with other teams, live halftime elements for our SEC network stuff. And then the other facility aspects, here's one of our 3 full-size control rooms, the front bench with the above-the-line crew, the back bench with the graphics, lots of Ross expressions everywhere as part of our SEC involvement. We have there across the end of the baseball field, you see the football stadium. Right underneath that big ATM on the right is where 12th Man Productions is. So we are fiber connected to every facility, just like many in this room. So here's our announcers calling the game. Here's our basketball arena. We just put in a video board. Everything's bigger in Texas, so we had to put in a big video board there this year. So integration, there's the new guy. Integration is very important. Scheduling is very important, and the challenges that we take across the board is working with our friends like Michelle, Justin, Andy Young at Auburn, all the different schools. I saw Benny here a while ago from Mississippi State. The challenge is to do this and do it across the board with all sports. So ESPN still is going to show up with a TV truck for our football games. So we're a video board show that day. But the night before we have a volleyball game, the night after we have a soccer game. So in the spring, ESPN takes a look and says, you figure out how you're going to support all those shows. And so we did over 80 plus shows this calendar year that aired on the ESPN platform. The video board shows were over around the 130 mark. Our media rights holder still doesn't care that we do stuff for ESPN. They want to make money on their own. So we have to support their aspects too. So
one of the points that was brought up on our first panel today with the ACC network schools was this fear that in going linear, somehow the video board show could potentially suffer. Obviously, the two of you have been through this. What steps did you take to make sure that when you were adding capabilities for the SEC network that you didn't forget about what the room was already responsible for?
We've kind of done it as we've gone along. We've had to add resources to each of our venues to support our video boards better. We went fully in with broadcast stuff first. But as we're 4 years in now, we've invested in more cameras, more places, more people to be able to do a separate video board show completely from the broadcast. But it's been a process. It wasn't that way the first year.
Yeah, I think one of our, just like Michelle, our first priority was to the network broadcast. And so our secondary control room that was doing the video board show, the first couple of years, it absolutely was a challenge to probably maintain what we would consider that used to be our primary goal and responsibility, and now what was a dual responsibility. And so during a basketball game, we would piggyback on the broadcast control room for all the video elements that you saw, the actual game action, the replays. Timeout happens, we have dedicated wireless cameras and a dedicated hard camera that dance team, crawl for cash, introduce the donor moment, all those things that are going on during a timeout while the broadcast is sitting waiting to come back out of the break. So that was one of our challenges, is how you sort of marry those two things together. Every sport has its different challenges with that, different shows for different venues. The basketball shows are going to be much bigger, and our media rights holder has a lot more interest in those than, say, maybe the indoor track show. But with no offense to the indoor track crowd, but that is, it's always a challenge.
So for any ACC schools that might be in the room that are in a position today that you guys maybe were a few years ago, what advice would you give? What were your biggest lessons learned as a part of the entire process? What would you maybe do differently, or do exactly the same?
I think it all boils down to people for us. We had to grow relatively slowly. I started that first year in 2014 with the network. We had 12 students. Now I have 50, but it took this long to get there. You can't double up your efforts if you don't have enough people to do it. So I think that was part of why we struggled the first year or so, doing both shows at a time. Now we're at a place where I have a good staff of people to be able to support both. So people ask for more people than you think you'll ever need.
A centralized control room gives us a lot of flexibility. I would tell you that if you are thinking about doing this, you do not cheat yourself on your router. It is the brains that make it all go. It is what makes everything connect to everything. And you also, to Michelle's point, you have to have people that understand the back end. I tell time I don't build clocks. So we have some very experienced engineers that are in the room with us today that between guys like Chuck and Jesse, we lean on a lot to help us manage the workflow of all this technology. I can agree to do a baseball game and softball game at the same time, and they got to figure out how we're going to make that technically happen with multiple comms, multiple headsets, graphics going one place and the other. We got to all ingest all that footage at some point and spit it out for both melt reels and for the archived elements that we're going to keep for long term. So people is it's easy to say, but the machines don't run themselves. And the centralized control room has given us much flexibility in regards to having high-end tools all in one place, the fiber connectivity to do it, but you're always going to be challenged to make sure that you invest in the people aspect as well.
And Jared, I'd like to bring you in at this point because you and the team at Ross have seen so many venues, so many of these centralized control rooms. What is it that you are seeing that works, and maybe what are you seeing that doesn't work in terms of pursuing the centralized control room model?
Well, I think the economics of what held people back from centralized control rooms, of course, was running fiber. Those costs are now being a little bit more well understood, and the leadership on college campuses understand the benefits of running that fiber. After these initiatives have taken place, the one thing I notice when I go to these control rooms are just the big advantages of having a really nice control room in a central location, just from an organizational standpoint, versus kind of smaller control rooms in the corner of buildings. And when you look at student initiatives and staffing, everything becomes a lot easier when you have a great facility that you can accommodate. In many cases, the staffing challenges, people show up at the same place. It's and then central creative services too. Like the video board shows have lots of demand for advertising and things like that. And it's these central control rooms, they really look like a broadcast facility now on campus, and there's a lot of benefits that fall out of it, just even outside of the cost savings.
I'll open it up to everyone else. What are some of the biggest benefits that you're seeing from the centralized control room model?
Our biggest benefit is we're working on building classes around the room currently for our comm major. So that is what is allowing us to have the ability to have a large number of student staff.
I think from our standpoint, I think that the panel name kind of says it. It's home. When you're strung out equipment all over the board and you've got stuff here and there and everywhere, it's home and everything is there, and you treat the place kind of like your home. You keep it clean and you keep it going and functional. So for us, that's really the kind of the landscape we look at it, is that it's our domain, it's our home, and the kids embrace it, the freelancers embrace it, the administration embraces it. So for us, that's probably the cornerstone of us.
I would agree with all of that. We also invite our coaches to use it as a recruiting tool. There are a lot of athletes that want to be in broadcasting, so it's absolutely a recruiting tool for our athletic programs as well. We're pretty centrally located in our basketball facility, so even our staff, our student staff, is there all the time. Our marketing and communications departments are right down the hall, so it lends to great collaboration. We're not spread out all over the campus as some are. So it's beneficial to us on many levels.
Yeah, I think I've seen some friends from the University of Nebraska in the room, and one of the people that we owe a great debt of gratitude, and we recognized him a couple of years ago, was Jeff Schmall, who passed away 3 years ago. And Jeff used to always say, and he'd tell me and Michelle the same thing. He said, everything you do, you need to make decisions based on like 3 things. He says, does it engage the fans? Is it entertainment oriented? Number 2, does it create revenue? And number 3, does it help us recruit? And you need to be able to answer one of those 3 things when you do these things. So when we started talking about doing a larger control room, certainly we were engaged to need to support the ESPN model and create broadcast quality programming, but we wanted to be able to serve multiple sports at the same time. Our administration and the folks that write the big checks understood that vision. The coaches understood that recruiting element. We have done in the past 3 years, as far as recruiting visits, more coaches have walked their athletes through our facility in the last 3 years than in the first 20 years I worked at Texas A&M, when we had 1 control room and 3 edit rooms, and it was in mismatched carpet. It was not a very pretty place. It wasn't bad, but it did we did what we could do with it. But we are now, and one of the things I think is really cool is listen to the people today and listen to the people this morning, is the ability to do big broadcast is so much more available now than ever before. And you talk about technology and the utilization of people like Ross or New Tech or the people in the other room, the vendors. So much more is capable of now, that doing a centralized control room makes sense for a lot of schools, not just big schools, but schools that maybe traditionally might not be as dominate the national landscape in terms of coverage, like Lamar and Valparaiso. So there's a lot of opportunity for everybody to play this game, and I believe centralized control rooms is a big win for all of us that do it, not only from a recruiting standpoint, but also from just a integrated standpoint to help influence our fan base in terms of entertaining them, and also to help revenue generation, and I can walk from one control room doing one sport to the other, and just the management aspect of managing different shows. You're not going a quarter of a mile or half a mile to go see how the three sophomores and junior are doing running the click effects at the baseball game. Now it's all right there, and it's all centralized to one place, and we can centralize our equipment in terms of what we're putting in each one of those rooms as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, earlier you mentioned the importance of the router, and I'm interested to hear what the other panelists think. When you're making those technology considerations, what is one or two of the biggest pieces that you needed to consider when pursuing this centralized model? Was it making sure your router had enough capacity? Was it making sure you had fiber connectivity? Was it making sure that you could scale up, certain pieces of gear? What exactly were your biggest technological considerations when pursuing this centralized model?
For us, at Valpo was fiber, first off. Mm-hmm. Without the fiber, we have no connectivity to anything. The second biggest thing was, with the help of Alpha designing it and myself, we had to make sure that we were able to expand that control room and add additional control rooms in the future when we need to.
I think probably the slogan I kind of go by, and I'm sure everybody else does up here as well, is plan for tomorrow, don't plan for today. And I see some people shaking their heads, and the thing is, yeah, you could buy 128 router, but do you know you're going to have more in-house stuff going on? Are you going to add more facilities? What are you going to do? And that's always a tough deal, especially for myself at a mid-major standpoint. Getting those answers out of your administration is not the easiest thing because, that's money down the road. Other people may be in different boats, but for us, I had a really good friend that was an engineer, and he said, we were doing a control room turnaround, and he goes, router, get you a bad, what. And that's what we did, and we were going to Utah Scientific, and so we love it. And I think that's, stepping back a second, I think that's what you have to plan for. And I'm sure these guys as well are planning for the future. And if you don't plan for the future, you're going to spend more money for a centralized control room every year buying some piece of equipment, buying some converter, buying some piece of whatever it may be to upgrade and to hold on to what you got to make it work for the next year. And don't do that. Just save your time and your money right now.
Yeah, I would agree. We had no connectivity, nothing at all in 2014 when the network was getting ready to go. So we took that opportunity to get fiber to every venue on our campus. We tried to get a bigger router than we thought we'd ever need. It's not big enough. So we'll have to do some more work as we continue to try to grow our facility. As we realize we probably could use another couple control rooms, which would mean more people, which means more equipment all the way around. So while we thought we were in a good spot in 2014, and Josh, the CTG, was there when we launched, we realized even the day of the launch, Scott was there. There were still other things in our brand new facility that we wish we could have changed at that moment that we didn't know until we were getting ready to hit the network. So you try to plan for everything and think ahead for what you don't know. It's a tricky game.
Yeah, I know we built 4 control rooms. We thought, man, we got more than most, and we'll be able to do everything. And at least 3 or 4 times this year, we drug out a 6-input switcher, set it up in a glorified closet to do a 5th event going on at the exact same time as 4 other things we were doing. And it's like, and the coaches don't really care. They just want to make sure it gets on the air. They don't see the backside. But the other aspect of a centralized control room is it does allow us to ramp up and ramp down specific events as they are deemed necessary. Is anybody from Incarnate Word in here? If you're not, okay, I'll tell the story. When we play Texas on a Tuesday night in baseball, that is a full broadcast. When we play Incarnate Word on a Tuesday night baseball, we may ramp that show down a little bit. And that is no disrespect to Incarnate Word, but it's just we're going to put resources where resources matter, and that's what a centralized control room allows us to do, is we can route resources as we need them. We have 4 dream catchers, 6 in, 2 out, and when we are doing a linear show, We may ramp that whole show up with 3 of those 4 dream catchers, and the 4th goes to the video board show. But we have if we had a basketball stadium that only had a video board control room, that video board control room could never help us in any other venue. That the fiber connectivity, the centralized control room allows us to do ramp those events up and down as we need to, based on a lot of different things. But certainly, team scheduling is an aspect that always weighs in. So.
And Jared, I'm curious from your perspective, working with these different teams and universities.
Well, sure. We of course work with the mid-major conferences all the way up to ACC and SEC, so we see the full spectrum. I guess some of what we've seen fall out of the SEC network, not fall out of it, but they were designing centralized control rooms, and it wasn't just for their own purposes. There was an end game where they could also be used for linear broadcast. So that's the difference. If you're a mid-major, you don't necessarily have to think about Fox or ESPN or a broadcast partner renting your control room for a linear event at this moment. You may or may not have to. But when they start sending people to your control room, next thing you know, there's comments about the intercom system, the audio, every lens is scrutinized. And so there's a difference with designing a central control room that your intent is to monetize with your broadcast partner and get paid for linear events. These schools did such a good job that not only are their control rooms getting utilized, and some of them took longer to get there. Some of the SEC schools were ready on day one, but their staff is being used now more so than was initially planned for, in my opinion. Almost the entire staff is doing the linear, except for the above-the-line staff that, in this case, ESPN would send in. So they did a great job, but it's those small things. It isn't, typically it's not the stuff you would normally think about in a truck. You don't have to have a $450,000 production switcher. It's little things like the way the comm systems function, and when they start sending above-the-line people in that are used to operating in a $7 million NEP truck, there's going to be comments and questions about why did you do it this way. And so I think those that are planning to utilize for linear have those additional considerations, and they should reach out to those that have already done it before, like Michelle and Andy, as well as those in the community that operate in trucks, and get feedback for maybe how they can make it their own. They don't have to design a truck. It doesn't have to be the exact same brand audio mixer and things like that. So they have the benefit of not having to cater to a freelance community with a truck that rolls around the country, but they still have to meet those technical and operational requirements that are demanded.
Are there any questions? Got one right in the middle and then one over on the side.
It seems to me that when you say singular control room, nobody here is talking about a single control room at the core of your stadium or at the core of your campus. Can you speak about what your control room count is, and if it's tiered, if you have a Class A control room and a B and a C? And if so, how are they brought online? Did you start with an A, or did you maybe start with a B and then later on ramped up an A or something like that?
We have, if we classed them, we have 3 Class A control rooms. They are top of the line with full broadcast capabilities, and all 3 rooms, they're all 3 exactly the same, with grass carbonite switchers, with Ross expressions, with ability to route dream catchers. The comm systems are all the same. If you went into any one of those 3 rooms to do a show, your seat, no matter what room you were in, looks exactly the same. We have a rack room. We have a cold room that where all the servers reside. We have a 4th control room that does all the, in essence, serves as what I would say is a mini control room, or probably would be a Class C room, where it is going to function primarily as a video board control room. It has a Ross It has a smaller switcher. It has comms to a producer on site that and server capability and Dreamcatcher, all the things that we can route to it, so that we can do a in-stadium show from that.
We have two Class A control rooms. They're exactly the same on both. Everything's routable from everywhere to those two. And then we have a third, smaller one that we use primarily for video board shows.
We have two. They're separate. We have an origination room that handles all the E3 content and does anything in-house. And then we have a room next door that, whereas they have a lot more linear events going, we have a much smaller scale, obviously. But we have a video board room that has click effects and has all the routing in there as well. So we have one room that picks one up and one room that utilizes a different way. So it's just catered to how we need it, so to speak.
Us at Valpo, we only have one control room that we just built and launched online in October. Our video board system is click effects, but that is actually run by our marketing department. So our broadcast crew has nothing to do with video board production there.
I believe there's a question over here. Oh, sorry.
Anybody?
Questions?
All right.
Right here.
So I guess one of the issues that we're dealing with is just convincing Central Control Room, how can we use that other than athletics? Is there any situation where you have to use it outside of an athletic aspect?
We utilize ours for coaches shows that we do. We also do a Hogsby. It's an award show that we do every year. We don't produce graduations out of it, but they tie into our equipment in order to put it on the video board, but we don't actually do the production. We do a signing day show out of there, just a couple one-offs like that, but it's primarily broadcast.
So we produce graduations. We actually have one here in about 4 or 5 hours, Texas time. We have a lot of high schools and collegiate ones, but we do that. We have rooms that we built, kind of a mini studio down the hall that we use for Facebook Live content, to go down there and do like a mini coaches show and stuff like that. So we use it for other things as well, special events for the president or special events going on in the university. So you've got to kind of throw that rhetoric out there a little bit to kind of, be the used car salesman a little bit, if you know what I mean.
Us at Valpo, we use ours for our 3 commencement ceremonies, and we just held Ivy Tech's commencement in our athletics facility, so we did their commencement production as well. We are planning on starting to use it for coaches shows and other press conferences, and pretty much any broadcast will come out of that room.
I think it was the University of Oklahoma when Bud Wilkinson was the coach, and the president of the university said, we want to build a university our football team can be proud of. And so we do strictly athletics productions. Our university is very proud of what we do. We on occasion use it for university VIP moments, but people, you always get the phone calls, hey, could y'all do this? Could y'all do this for and the reality is, when we're doing 133 plus video board shows and over, 13 live events this year, we want to all be able to at some point go home, and so we have talked our administration into actually supporting that aspect of what we do. So you never say never. We have done a graduation. We do help facilitate some university elements within some of our venues when certain things are asked of us, but we will invoice them for those types of things as well.
So when it comes to only having one facility that's responsible for so much, each of you has mentioned all the different things that your facility is responsible for. How do you determine what takes precedence over what? Obviously, you said athletics takes precedence over graduation or anything like that at Texas, but in terms of production resources, but also personnel resources, you're all dealing with student staffs or freelancers. So how do you determine, you've got only one facility and you've got X amount of venues, digital platforms, linear, channels. What is the most important? What gets the resources?
So I meet with our coaches before the year, before their seasons start. Soccer and volleyball conflict a lot. Baseball and softball conflict a lot. Baseball is probably our highest viewed event that we do, so we're going to do every baseball game. We just are. So softball, it becomes a conversation with our coach regarding doing it as a pass-through or a full show. And I let her decide what she wants to do. That way she gets to be the one upset about it and not me. I tell her what our resources are, and she makes that call. So I have that meeting with every coach ahead of time so they're not surprised when they don't have a broadcast for whatever reason.
Okay.
We actually kind of segment our productions a little differently. We have a platform, a digital platform, that serves for all our, I don't want to say the word sub-sports, but volleyball, soccer, some of the smaller ones, so to speak. But our basketball and both basketball and football all get the ESPN treatment. But these other guys are on Facebook Live and Sidearm and all these other platforms you can go to. So we have to be conscientious. I think when I first started, I was an old basketball coach, and I was a firm believer of everybody showing up every night to everything, including we're gonna have a fish fry Saturday at my house. And the problem is with that is that these are 18 and 19 and 20-year-old kids that have class and have lab and whatever. So, we have a healthy mix of freelancers that come into the mix, so to speak, that these are professionals within our local DMA market, and some from Houston and the Austin and Dallas area as well that come in and do talent and so for whatever reason. But you have to have a healthy mix because, if you start trying to just have one kid continue to work or one freelancer work, it's like Andy said, you're going to want to go home at some point in time. It's just a matter of when. But you've got to really schedule, and you've got to know how not to beat down and be beaten down, so to speak.
Really, for us, the nice thing is having the large pool of student crew members, especially with one control room that I only have to staff. So it's not like I have to work every single person every single game. I pretty much allow them, the student members, to pick which productions they want to work. And then if I can't fill a position, I'll open it back up. And at least this past year, I have not had a problem crewing it. And that's our biggest thing that we're complimenting ourselves on is, yes, we do pay all of our crew members. Yes, it's only $7.50 an hour. But at least that helps them get the experience, which is the most important thing, is getting that experience and working on a great production. And as far as scheduling, we haven't ran into a scheduling conflict yet where we've had to make the big decision of yes to a production and no to a production. Our sporting schedules have all pretty much lined up where we've been able to do multiple broadcasts in a day.
Two things, just piggyback on what everybody else has said. From a scheduling standpoint, we run into the same things. Even with multiple control rooms, we're always challenged to try to do multiple events that may overlap on a weekend or a calendar day. So we use a little checklist of questions we ask ourselves at the beginning of the year when we're figuring out which events we're going to do. Number one, is it a conference opponent? If it's a conference opponent, we're going to make every effort to do a full broadcast show and full video board show. Number two, is that opponent a non-traditional a powerhouse opponent, or is it a traditional historic powerhouse opponent? And once again, it would go back to the University of Texas versus Incarnate Word. And which show would we spend more time and effort and resources to ramp up versus maybe ramping down? And then from a student perspective, we have about 90 students that work for us. They give us the ability to choose kids to work certain weekends. We'll have the same crew work every weekend series of a baseball game, the same crew work every series of a softball game, and then we rotate around so that if you work that last weekend, then you may get the next weekend off. And so the spring we have 3 rotating crews of live event crews. And so as we get into softball and baseball, in which they're overlapping multiple times, we are always giving one crew some time off while two crews are working. So that means that you got 60 kids on crews, and you got another group of kids that are traveling with teams and doing some of the behind-the-scenes editing and graphics. And so we always are in the numbers game of what is the right number of kids, the right number of kids that are qualified enough for us when we do a linear show for ESPN, because those kids are going to be the top cream of the crop. We're going to put our best foot forward with ESPN every time in terms of our linear shows. So we make a lot of choices at the beginning of the year based on scheduling, based on when Andy Green and our friends at ESPN send us the list of can you do these games list. This past year, I think we did 17 linear shows out of our facility. And we declined 2 of them based on the fact that one of them was during spring break and the other one was during finals. But we did the one on Easter Sunday, and so we feel good about that, Andy. So.
All right. Well,
Karen, I had one comment. This may not help Andy go home, but in a couple years, I think we're going to be up here speaking about esports. So when we talk about planning for control rooms, not just on the technology front, but on the operations front. We do business with the gaming companies, with Epic, with Blizzard, with ESL Turtle, the production companies as well. This is coming to college campus. Esports is coming. I don't know when. There, of course, may be a phase-in process where instead of Hootie and the Blowfish showing up, it'll be a one-off tournament with a DJ on a Friday. But eventually it'll make it to the conference level with teams. There'll be dynamics with NCAA playing out. There'll be potentially money changing hands. But the responsibilities in this room to produce, I think those will be requirements that this room is going to help solve on college campuses. They have expertise for broadcast and for venue production, which is a big component of an esport production. Feeding LED in a venue, as well as studio element and in-game action. It's very much the same recipe, but it's coming to college campus. I don't know when, but be prepared.
as if everybody here wasn't busy enough. Now we've got esports down the pike. So anyway, I'd like to thank my panelists. Unfortunately, it's all the time we have.